The Coalition for Juvenile Justice is a membership organization of the state advisory groups for all 56 states and territories in the United States. State advisory groups are the federally required oversight bodies in each of the states in juvenile justice. So there is a federal law called the Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention Act that requires SAGs in all of the states. And so the Coalition for Juvenile Justice in Section 4 has been the membership organization and really the kind of advocacy voice at the national level for those organizations. Significant differences are in the juvenile justice system, in addition to young people who are accused of committing crimes as an individual system, you have what are called status offenders. And status offenders are juveniles who are accused of doing things that, if they were adults, would not be considered crimes. So these are things like drinking underage or smoking, truancy, so missing school, and running away from home, things like that. So that adds a really different dimension to the services and to the tenor of the juvenile justice system, because those are really kinds of acts that, or offenses that you want to deal with pretty differently than you would crime. You're really dealing with kind of a lot of what it means to be a teenager. And so that puts a really different spin on the juvenile justice system. Aside from that, or sort of attached to that, is the juvenile justice system is much more rehabilitative in its nature than the criminal system. So even though there's been a lot of work in the past decade to move the adult criminal system into more of a rehabilitative mindset, the juvenile justice system, there's a much less of a heavy lift to do that. So you've got much more of a sense of, these are kids who have promise, and we're able to do more things to sort of help them out. Having said that, there are still challenges, still are victims of the on-crime kind of mentality that's out there, and so we are still struggling with that and kind of pulling kids into the adult system, for example, for certain kinds of crimes. Generally, I would say you've got many more people on the side of rehabilitation in juvenile justice compared to adults, and I think the status offenses adds a really different dimension. Having a good understanding of adolescent development is really critically important. And again, I don't mean you need to go out there and get a psychology degree or what have you, although those things may be very helpful, but really having some operating understanding of how it is that kids develop, where they are at various ages in terms of what they understand and what their kind of decisions they're able to make is really important. I think you can get some of that through social work classes. Again, not necessarily being a licensed social worker, but through some of those social work classes, understanding how to work with families. Also, we have a lot of crossover kind of issues in juvenile justice. So specifically, kids who are involved both in juvenile justice and in the child welfare systems or child protective services. So understanding something about how child welfare works, I think, is really important. And then, of course, there's also, these are kids who are in school. So understanding something about the crossover between schools and the juvenile justice system, or what you'll hear a lot about as the school to prison pipeline, that I think is really important, particularly special education. So we'll see a lot of kids in the juvenile justice system, and this is the same in the adult system, who are struggling with substance use, but also mental health issues or behavioral needs issues. And so those are the kinds of kids who are going to also have IEPs or individualized education plans in special ed. So you want to know something about how that system works as well. Despite all the stuff that you read in the paper and hear in the news, not everybody is a murderer or rapist or, serial. So just as in the adult system, in the juvenile system, the vast majority of the people you're working with are kids who are status offenders. So again, these are not things that would be considered crimes if they were adults, and also low-level delinquency acts, right? So these are not overwhelmingly speaking, your serious sexual offenders or murderers or all that. I think there has been probably less dialogue now, but more in the past about, juvenile super predator. That really is not a reality. I think that even more important than that, and sort of tied to this idea of super predator, is one of the huge misconceptions is sort of what I like to call the gateway drug misperception. Juvenile justice, by many is believed to be an entry point to a life of crime. And evidence and research out there just doesn't support that. Kids who are involved in the juvenile justice system are overwhelmingly not going to ever again be involved in a justice system in their lives. So these are kids who got in trouble when they were kids and then never again, never in the adult criminal system. It is actually more rare that they do get re-involved in the criminal system. So I think that again speaks to the age group. These are kids who are going through transition. They're moving from being young children to adults, and they make decisions really differently than adults do, and they have very different kinds of value systems. And so they do things while they're adolescents that they're not going to necessarily do as adults. That's a really important piece to understand going in, because even though I think more and more people are coming to terms with that, the system is really still largely built on the premise that it has to prevent all this adult criminal activity from happening. And the reality is that we could probably spend a lot less time and resources with most of these kids, and they would still end up doing just as well, if better. There's an emerging evidence in criminal justice that basically says with certain kinds of defendants or offenders, the less you do, the actual better the outcomes will be for defendants and for the community. They'll recidivate less. They'll get involved in crime less. That really, I think, is about 10 times truer in the juvenile justice system. There are, I think, a huge number of kids who we spend a lot of time and resources intervening, both in terms of court time and probation and correctional time, who if we just didn't do anything at all, those kids would never be in the system again, and they would never commit crimes in the future. And instead, we are spending time with those kids and getting them deeper and deeper involved in the system, which triggers all of these other negative things happening, like child welfare. You'll see that kids who are involved in status offenses, for example, if your child is a truant, not only is your kid going to get involved in the juvenile justice system, but you as a parent may have a petition put against you or charged against you as being a negligent parent. And so now you've got two enormous behemoth systems involved in your life when you probably could have had a much more low-impact intervention in figuring out, well, why is the kid missing school so much? What can we do that's minimally intrusive, more community-based to get that kid back on track that doesn't involve all of this other stuff going on, and which costs a ton of money, by the way. I would just say that having come from the criminal justice system into the juvenile justice system has been a really exciting change for me. And so I think for students who maybe have spent their educational career focusing on criminal justice, not necessarily paying a lot of attention to juvenile, I would encourage you to take a second look, because I think that there's a lot of promise in the juvenile justice field. It's a smaller world in a lot of ways. It's not as big a system as the adult system, but there's a lot of room there for creative, rehabilitative ideas. There's much, much more of an awareness of race, ethnicity, and class issues in the juvenile justice system than in the criminal justice system. So if those are things that really drive you, I think you may want to take a closer look at juvenile justice.